It is that time of year where we reflect on the Bulls season, do season wrap-ups, recaps, look ahead to options and opportunities for the offseason, but it's also that time where we look back on every player's season on the roster and assess how they showed up relative to their expectations. I've done this every year on the channel after the conclusion of the season, which was last week for the Bulls, and just like we've done in past years, I would love to see your grades for each player in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, a few call outs. I always have to call this out because inevitably I'm going to get called out on it. But these grades, which are going to be letter grades, are relative to the players' expectations at the start of the season and relative to their role on the team. Thus, if I give Javonte Green an A and DeMar a B, it does not mean I think Javonte is a better player than DeMar, but simply basing it on what we expect of said player given their role. So I'm going to start with the starting lineup, or at least the guys who closed out the season in the starting lineup, and I'll start with the Bulls' best player in DeMar DeRozan. DeMar had another great year. I would even argue that it was a better season for him overall than last year because while some of his shooting numbers were down, not as efficient compared to last season, shooting 48% compared to 50%, at the same time though, DeMar had to take on an even bigger role for the Bulls with Zach Lavine being out for most of the season. He upped his overall passing and playmaking while also managing to reduce his turnovers significantly despite his higher usage. He actually contributed more to winning than he ever has since being a Chicago Bull, finishing the year with 9.2 win shares, which was top 20 in the league, and impressive considering the Bulls only won 39 games overall. And of course, we cannot underestimate just how good he was for the Bulls in closing out games and being the clutchest player in the league, despite the fact that he did not win Clutch Player of the Year award, even though he should have, which I talked about in my prior video. But with him scoring in the fourth quarter and overtime and leading the Bulls to most clutch wins in the NBA, like, let's be real, without DeMar, the Bulls likely don't even win 30 games this season. The Bulls won a lot of their games this year with DeMar willing them to a victory. So while yes, the results of the Bulls season overall were disappointing, DeMar's impact was palpable. And even though he still does the frustrating things at times, like pounding the ball and getting tunnel vision, playing heavy ISO and not pushing the pace, I personally felt like he was much more conscious about getting guys involved, moving the ball around more, playing a bit faster, and he also committed to taking more threes. He actually took the second most threes in his career this season, the most he's done with the Bulls to at least try and help spread the floor. So I'm giving DeMar an A-. The only reason for the minus is because Bulls still only won 39 games and missed the playoffs with him as the leader. I know it's a team sport, but your best player and team leader takes on that accountability more than others. Let's do Vucevic now. You look at Vuce and what he brings to this team, you see his numbers, always averaging a double-double yet again, finishes top 10 in rebounding, puts up 18 points per game, solid passer for a big man, good instincts, good IQ, consistent, always available, and he's a starting caliber center. But when you see Vucevic on the court, it paints a little bit of a different picture. And look, this is coming from someone who is usually a Vucevic defender. But when you see him on the court, you see, one, why the Bulls' interior defense is so bad, literally some of the worst I've seen from Vucevic in his tenure with the Bulls. You see how slow he is when it comes to attacking the basket, and more often than not, you see him getting outworked by quicker, more athletic bigs, which is where the league is trending right now. But above all of that, the thing that stands out to me the most is Vucevic's body language, his demeanor and overall effort on the court. A lot of times Vuce just doesn't look like he wants to be there. At times even checked out in games. Now don't get me wrong, I get Vuce's frustration. He was traded to this team, and this isn't what he signed up for, nearing the end of his career to be consistently missing the playoffs. And yes, guys don't find him when they should. Yeah, he could be used as an offensive hub more, but don't pout and stop playing because things aren't going your way. A lot of heated moments from Vucevic this year, technical fouls and ejection, just really, really bad vibes from Vuce this season, despite more or less having the same level of output. Oh, and he also, his three-point shooting was horrendous, shooting below 30% on 4 attempts per game. Yeah, that killed the Bulls this season. And Vuce is no longer that floor spacer and big that he once was. Thus, for Vucevic, I'm giving him a C on the year. For Coby White, I don't think I need to go into too much detail since I just put out a video on him earlier this week about him getting snubbed for the Most Improved Player of the Year award. But for Coby, incredible year. It wasn't always perfect. He's still hot and cold, struggled to start the season and down the stretch after he got injured, but going from being an average role player coming off the bench, really that's what Coby was, maybe slightly above average last season because he had started showing some signs of improvement in a lot of aspects of his game, but to that, to becoming a bona fide starter in the NBA with great handles, scoring, and shooting ability, but also improved passing and decision-making, much better job taking care of the ball. I know he was inconsistent at times, but when you consider the sentiment of how Bulls felt about Coby, including myself, and the expectations we had of him, for an $11 million a year player, he surpassed those expectations, and without a doubt, I'm giving Coby an A this year. Next, let's do Alex Caruso. Again, some of these I'm going to keep short because I think they're obvious and I don't want this video to be a half hour long. But for AC, what more can you say about his impact? I mean, arguably the most impactful player on the court when you consider both sides of the ball. We already know just how good Caruso is on defense and being one of the best defenders in the game. Surefire first team all defense again this season. His ability to read passes, navigate screens, play defense on and off the ball, lead the league in steal percentage for the second straight season. Like I said, we knew all that, right? We know that he's a defensive savant, and that is Alex Caruso. What was more impressive to me though this season was just how much he upped his offensive game and becoming one of the better three-point shooters in the league and the Bulls' best three-point shooter, shooting over 40% from deep on 4.7 attempts per game. Shooting 46% overall, leading the team in true shooting percentage, upping his rebounds, his assists, his impact on winning on so many levels, and because of his improved efficiency on offense, that alone exceeded expectations for me of Alex Caruso. Thus, I'm giving him an A as well. And then to round out the starting lineup, let's do Ayo Dosunmu, who I said so many times throughout the season in my post-game videos, as impressive of a jump as Coby White has had this year, you could argue Ayo's jump was even more impressive. And I only say that because people liked what they saw from Coby last year in making strides in the right direction. You could see that he was on the up and up. Ayo, we weren't sure if he was going to be coming back to this team. He had a very down year in his sophomore season, but this season, Ayo was a new man. And when you factor in his contract at around $7 million relative to the kind of production he had, you realize the Bulls got a steal in the offseason. Ayo, like Caruso, had a very efficient shooting year, shooting 50% overall from the floor on near 10 attempts per game, averaged double figures for the first time in his career at over 12 per game. Down the stretch, it was becoming more commonplace to just see Ayo putting up 20 points like it was nothing, and doing all of that while still maintaining his strong defense. Yeah, I'm giving Ayo an A as well. Let's move on to the bench now. I'm going to start with Andre Drummond. You know, for all of the boneheaded plays Drummond makes and some of the weird things he does on the court, you had to respect the level of hustle and effort when he's out there, always stepping up and ready to play. Vucevic went down for a few games due to injury, and then Drummond was thrown into the starting lineup and he balled out. He had 20 games. There were a lot of things I appreciated Drummond about this season, whereas last year I feel like I got frustrated with him more often than not. We'll see what his future holds as far as, you know, whether or not the Bulls are actually going to bring him back. I doubt that they do, but he had a good season. I'm going to give him a B+. Let's do Torrey Craig. You know, injuries really set Craig back because he actually looked decent to start the year. And I even had a few tweets talking about how I loved Craig for his grit and aggression, especially in snagging offensive rebounds. That was during the beginning of the season. But being in and out of the lineup, didn't really find a consistent role, wasn't necessarily the three-point shooter we thought he would be. I'm going to give Torrey Craig a C+, which I know isn't entirely fair because, again, injuries. But to me, Torrey Craig and that whole experiment of bringing in a veteran enforcer just really wasn't there for me. Let's do Dalen Terry now. I'll say this about Terry because after seeing him very little last season and seeing him in the summer league and going into preseason play, I had incredibly low expectations of Dalen Terry. Like, it was to the point where I thought Terry might even be out of the league by the time his rookie contract is up. I thought he was that bad. I just did not see him as an NBA level player. But about midway through the season, the Bulls going through all of these injuries and Terry getting some run, you could see that he had improved. His shot is still really bad, but he had much better instincts, better flow of the game, improved passing. He's always a great hustler and plays really fast, but he had it a bit more under control this season. So while I'm sure some of you will say I'm crazy, I'm actually going to give Terry a B on the year, as for me anyway, he did exceed expectations. How about Julian Phillips? You know, it was unfortunate he got injured in March, I believe it was, and then never returned. Really hope that that doesn't turn into something serious, so it's hard to grade Phillips when he only played 40 games on the year, but in the games he did play, I liked what I saw. Not afraid of the moment, hustles, plays with confidence. I'm giving him a B as well, which I know is high, but it's hard to give him a fair and accurate grade when we really didn't get to see him all that much. And then Javon Carter, I mean, let's be real, Javon was a disappointment this season. For a guy that we thought was going to come in and be a great off-ball shooter and point of attack defender, but at the same time probably didn't get the role that he needed. Like, yes, the Bulls needed shooting going into the offseason. They needed more on-ball perimeter defending, but getting yet another guard for this already guard-heavy team did not make sense. And because Coby and Ayo both had breakout seasons, it became hard to justify putting Javon in the rotation. And Carter actually started out the season decently well. He was hitting shots outside, played solid D, but then his shots started hitting iron. He was too small to really be that effective on defense. His confidence became a little shot. he was becoming much more hesitant, poor decisions on the court. But yeah, for me, I don't know how you can't give Javon Carter an F, maybe a D- if you want to be generous, but relative to his expectations and being the Bulls' big free agency signing, yeah, it was a disappointment. Now, I'm going to do Zach Lavine and Patrick Williams, even though both players missed a lot of time this year. For Zach, again, I know injuries, but even when he was healthy in the start of the season, he just was not that good. His shot was off, he seemingly lost his elite finishing ability, turned the ball over at a high rate, and he was a liability on the defensive end of the floor and always getting lost on that end. And when you consider the fact that Zach is on a max contract, your highest paid player, and you also factor in just everything that transpired between all the trade drama, his demeanor as a whole, yeah, I can't give Zach a good grade. A D, I guess. And then for Patrick Williams, what's unfortunate about Pat is that he was actually making strides in the right direction. Like, people won't remember that. They'll only remember those last few games he played when he came back from the initial injury. And then, of course, he really struggled to kick off the start of the season. But there was a period where people were talking about how, hey, we're finally starting to see Patrick Williams come to life. He's becoming the player we were hoping for. It was around the time when Coby White was going on his hot streak after Zach went down and Patrick was starting to look like a true NBA starter, and you thought, well, this is a pleasant surprise given this horrible start that we've had to the year and the outlook this team had back in mid-November. So I actually thought that Patrick Williams looked better than what most people will give him credit for. I wouldn't say it was a great season, and obviously it's still below expectations that we have of him as a player when it comes to his potential. So I'm going to give him a C+, and I do think it likely would have been higher had he not gotten injured and we would have been able to see him throughout most of the year. I'm not going to be grading Batum or Javonte Green because they didn't play enough games on the season, and I also don't do the two-way contract players for these types of videos, but that's it. Those are the grades for all of the Bulls players. I want to know what you guys think. I want to hear your grades for each individual player in the comments. Let me know. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.